Welcome to the Worship Leader Next Door podcast. We're here to give encouragement and counsel and dig deep into the spiritual and practical issues encountered when leading others in expressions of musical worship. Wherever you are on your journey, we hope you find this a safe space, and we're excited to have you along for the ride.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Worship Leader Next Door podcast. I am super excited today because we have a very special guest with us. Stephanie Skipper is in the house today.
I'm so excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you.
Friends.
Yes, she's a good friend. We've done worship ministry together forever. The last 10 years, almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And we're just excited to have Stephanie on here to share her story. She has lived a rich and full life of, she's just someone that lives fully in every aspect, in every area of her life. She leans into fullness, into wholeness and healing. You're going to hear my son Jalen a lot this episode. He is kicking. He is excited. He is very awake.
We are best friends, me and Jalen.
Yes, and he loves Stephanie to a very sweet, extreme degree. Yeah. He's literally laughing,
so cute,
looking at her right now.
The cutest.
So we just want to have Stephanie on to share her story with being an artist. She's actually now an author. We're going to talk about her new book this podcast. It's very exciting. We definitely want to make sure all of you know clearly how to get a hold of this. It's her story. It's really a beautiful, just a beautiful work that she did. And then she's also a worship leader. She's a worship leader here in town at our church. And so there's a lot that Stephanie is going to be able to, I think, offer some gold nuggets today on showing up fully in our creativity as we serve on worship teams, as we lead worship teams. Stephanie has kind of done it all, is doing it all in this way. So I just wanted her to kind of share a little bit about who she is, the season that she's in. You can share a little bit of how you got into music and how you landed in Nashville, how you got in the local church leading worship. Those might be some good places to start.
That's right.
And then we'll just kind of ask you some fun questions. I think you guys are going to love this episode today. So make sure to listen to the whole thing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And first of all, I'm so proud of you guys for doing the thing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You started it. You're going for it.
We are.
I love it.
It's so fun.
Yeah. So here I'm like doing life with you guys. Didn't even know that you were doing this. I posted something and said, hey, I am looking to be on podcasts. And Kate was like, I have a podcast.
Oh my gosh, that's so
it's
fun.
not out yet, but I have one.
Perfect. Yes.
I didn't even know that part. That's so fun.
We're all learning
I
and
love
practicing.
I know.
And,
Part
and
of
showing up.
my growth right now is like putting myself out there.
Yeah.
It's kind of that full circle. Like
it is very full circle.
It is, because that is risky, and some of the information at different times in my life has been that is painful and too vulnerable and not going to do that again.
Right.
And so that can be a way then to control. Yeah. And then you're not participating fully, because you're going, one thing I can control is if I don't try, then I won't be let down or rejected.
Right.
Oh my
exactly.
gosh.
And so,
girl, that's just.
It's a very effective survival mechanism,
sure
unfortunately.
Yeah, and there are times where we do just have to survive. Yeah. And maybe that wisdom is, all right, we're going to keep it close. We're going to keep our inner circle small. Sure. But that, when we make vows to ourselves that that's the rest of my life, this is how I live now and how I protect myself, our world gets small, we isolate, and the answer is always connection and reemerging. So part of my reemerging and putting myself out there was I wrote this book. It's called Thank You for Failing Me. And essentially it is a story of how I looked for my self-worth and significance. First, in my absent father, I thought maybe if I could meet him and win him over, he would see like what he was missing and love me, and I could be affirmed in my value. Then I thought, well, okay, that didn't go very well, but my childhood idol signed me to a record label. Yeah. And I thought, okay,
there it is.
Will you be my daddy? I don't know that I consciously knew
What do you feel about this role?
But it was like the perfect,
he's a nice guy.
Perfect setup. Small label called Goatee Records. I'm still have a really good relationship with those guys, owned and started by Toby Mac. And Toby personally discovered me, brings me into this label. They call it a family. They call him like dad sometimes jokingly.
Oh, funny.
So the setup is like, he went from dude on a poster on my wall and like, somebody I knew every rap to in the early 90s.
Got to.
DC Talk.
Yep. Oh, yeah, you got to.
To like, hey, come be part of this thing. Wow. I see you. I believe in you. And so for me, I was like, don't let Toby down. And for a number of reasons, it didn't work. The brand, my name, Stephanie Smith at the time, the brand was my story, this kind of dramatic story with my dad.
Right.
That was still unfolding. I probably wasn't ready to share it. But I you don't know what you don't know. So grace.
And
But
you were so young.
I was so young.
I mean, you were thrown into like
an industry that I wanted to be part of so badly.
Totally. Yeah.
I was like, and one of my gifts and weaknesses is I'm adaptable. So I was like, sure, I can be whoever you need me to be.
Yeah.
But what that did was I didn't do some of the work of, well, who am I? And if you don't like it, then it might not be a good fit. And that could be perceived as rejection.
Right.
And so that's really scary work to do in general, to know what am I and what am I not?
Right.
Instead, I was like, I can be anything you want me to be.
Right. And I am here for it.
But the whole thing kind of didn't work for a ton of reasons. And really, I don't stand in like, it's no one person's fault. I really think if it was meant to blow up, there was no ceiling that God could not have busted through. So clearly it wasn't meant to be.
He was funneling
Here
you
we are.
to where he wanted you to be, but it still was a huge painful
letdown.
road. Yeah.
Yes. I left there with my tail between my legs, and I didn't know how to differentiate between my brand, which was my face, my name, and my story, from me, the person.
Right.
So the brand didn't sell. It didn't work. It was a quote unquote on paper failure. So I felt like I was a failure.
Right.
And I left there having met a cute boy on the label. And I thought, well, I'll just get married. And
that solution.
He'll love me. Yeah. And then marriage turned out to be really hard. And we have been invited to help redeem and refine broken and hidden places in each other. Yeah. And that has proven to be really hard but beautiful work. But to say the least, my expectations of marriage healing or saving me or proving that I was lovely and loved let me down as well. So finally that kind of third letdown was, am I participating in this somehow? Like, this seems like it keeps happening. And so the gift for me was, I think it all was meant to fail us. And I saw it. And I saw that man and career and status or fame or success, even a healthy, beautiful relationship, we cannot find our worth or our esteem or our identity in those things. And I actually had to go back further because I looked at my parents, my family of origin, and I was a surprise. So my little girl was like, I've not been wanted my whole life. Yeah. And it dawned on me that, but my husband and I have struggled with infertility for 8 years or so. And that one of the gifts that has come out of that is that you can throw a lot of money at a doctor. Science can do a lot, but it can't make life. It just can't.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so maybe I was a surprise to my parents, but something bigger than all of us wanted me here and said, she can't be stopped.
So good.
And so if that's the foundation I stand on, then when doors close in my face or people decide they can't love me in the way that I desire to be loved, they're allowed to decide that. There's a lot of people out there. If I've given my worth away to them, then I crumble. I'm a shell of a human. If I know who I am, then I can have some feelings about it, but I can stand on my sacred ground that's been established by, the God that said, she can't be stopped. There's space for her. And then life becomes an adventure to be lived, not a problem to be solved.
Wow.
So good.
Rewind that 15 seconds. Yeah. Write it down. Read it again on your mirror.
Yes,
yeah. And I wish that was still my first instinct. I have to practice it too.
Yeah.
Because no's can still take me out at the knees.
Yeah,
I put we started, when you put yourself out there and someone's like, no, thanks. I'm like, you hate me. Don't belong.
You're mad at me.
I'm going to hide under the covers.
Yeah.
I go and I just pick up some of my tools and I remember that, I have this image of, running in this beautiful open pasture and you come up against a dead end that might be the no. and a loving God that's like, that just means don't run in that direction.
Wow.
But look at how much other space there is to run and explore and play in. So just receive that no with gratitude. It just means that's not worth your time. Let's go over here, sweet girl, you know? So if I can look at it that way, it's not personal. There's still space for me. The exploration can continue. And so here we are, putting myself out there. The story is all kind of sandwiched in my dad and I's story, and learning to love him from a freer place once I wasn't looking for him to establish my worth anymore. I was free to say, would you just tell me about your human experience? Instead of, Dad, do you see me? Dad, do you love me? Dad, are you proud of me? Dad, Dad. And turns out people respond to that energy pretty differently. And I need something from you that you don't have to give me.
Right. Just being like, hey, I know that I'm okay, that I'm, no matter what you have available, I know that doesn't affect my ability to be whole or my invitation to be whole. And in the Lord, as cliche as that sounds, within myself.
Well, and then the God factor is, it's okay that he had so much less than I deserved or wanted, because God is faithful to provide it in other creative ways. So if I hold like a metaphorical gun to my dad's head or my husband or, fill in the blank, if we say like, you have to love me in this way, and what the information that's coming in is they either don't know how, they weren't loved in that way, they're broken themselves, they're incapable. We want to make it so personal, but it might be that that's our prayer to God, that God, my heart is starving to be loved in this way. Find me open to the ways you might love me that I haven't attached or an assignment yet, to a person, place, or thing. And so, like, God, I trust you to love this needy heart in ways that I haven't even thought of.
Wow.
So then we're not abandoning ourselves or our need either, but we can release people from being everything.
That is so rich. And I think that, like even I want to funnel that into even a ministry context. How did that show up for you? Because so Stephanie, you found Journey. How long have you been how long have you been serving locally in worship?
I moved here in 2006, January of 2006, and I went into a church in the factory called Ecclesia.
Right. Okay.
And Journey and Ecclesia merged, I think, later that year or maybe early 2007. So it wasn't long. 2007 to now. I can't even do that math.
Yeah, I know. I'm like,
I'm sure, 18 years.
18 or 17.
2027 would be 20 years, right?
Yeah, so like 17.
So almost.
17 years. So, many different variations of Journey, but I loved it. I felt kind of drawn to it, and I've seen, like I said, I've seen it through a lot of change.
Yeah, definitely.
But I started leading there pretty quickly. There was a guy named Drew Klein who was the worship leader. Do you remember Drew?
Gosh, I forgot about Drew.
I was there briefly. I feel like he had just left.
Oh my gosh. Talk about a guy that can sing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I never got to hear him sing, but I just remember hearing that name.
Wow, his voice.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was pretty locked up. I was scared. I was intimidated because it was the big city. Maybe you guys have talked about this before, but the difference between the artistry hat and the worship leader hat.
Well, that's what we haven't really gotten to tap a lot on that yet. So you could really,
I would love to hear from you.
I want to hear like how that was for you.
Yeah, it was very confusing. Our buddy Brett Mabry, I think I got to give him credit for kind of naming it or articulating it, but he named an experience I was having, and it helped me see what I hadn't seen. But I struggled through it for years before I could name it. So I came to town to do this artist thing, and it's like pop, and it's shiny, and it's tutus, and it's, it's like
performing.
Whoa, it's performing. Yeah. It's like ripped t-shirts and lots of makeup and big hair and like fun shoes and nothing subtle.
Right. Yeah.
And then I knew that wasn't necessarily the energy, although that's a part of me. But then how do I show up? I'm part of a collective. It's not about me. But how do I sing in freedom? And I do kind of have a big voice, but I didn't want to look like I was trying to overpower. And I would just, my MO is to just shrink. Or just, I think my whole life I've assumed somebody knows more than me. And so I would just give that away so quickly.
Yeah.
Just be a wallflower, supporting role, whatever. I grew up, I first started singing in the church. Okay. And that was also painful. I was so shy. I just was a late bloomer. Sweet Stephanie. My youth pastor would be like, eat the mic, because I'd hold it way back here and I was afraid to hear myself, and I was just locked up. Wow. So even though I had this record deal and I was pursuing this music thing as an artist, I didn't know where I fit or how to bring that to a worship setting. So to bring it back to Brett Mabry, he said the artist feels as though they have received something from God, their art, that what they want to say and how they want to say it or paint it or, sonically deliver it, whatever. The artist has sort of received something and then they want to offer it to the room. So the position is like it's coming from God to me, and it can be a holy experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's kind of flowing through me to you.
Right.
Whereas the worship leader is sort of on the front lines of the room, but you are with the congregation. You're reading the room. You're going, where are we?
Yeah.
Do we need to stay on that course a little longer? Is there something that's marinating? And so you're very tuned into the room as you're leading to the throne.
Yeah.
So the energy, the direction's a little different as opposed to, and there might be moments where you have like a word or something impressed on your heart and you're inviting, or you have something that like, I feel it's, and it's important to speak up and know when that happens. But for the most part, the hat you put on is like, I'm part of a whole, even the image of a band, we've agreed on a few things, but other than that, we're all doing our own thing.
Wow.
So we've agreed on the key and the tempo.
Right.
Wow.
Otherwise, it's a bit of a mess. Yeah,
Right.
hopefully
you agree.
We've all been part of the ones that
is true.
missed the.
If you are in your churches and that is not agreement is not happening, we're for
salute,
you.
I salute you.
We've seen you on worship fails. It's okay.
Keep submitting the videos. We all have been there.
That's right. So we're agreeing on tempo and key. Other than that, the drums, the bass, the harmony parts, the keys, everyone's doing something a little different. So you're still bringing yourself to something that we've agreed on, and we're working together as a whole. So it's one body, many parts.
Yep.
And so I love that idea, even of the worship leaders representing, then you have this congregation. It's one body, many parts. And the drummer can't say to the guitarist, I don't need you, the hand to the... And so even in that small little collective of the worship team, we're representing the church. And so bringing that energy and saying, even in your rehearsal, whether you do that on a Thursday night or, morning of like we do, just starting with telling the truth. Like, I think the room changes when you show up and you're like, man, I don't even know if I want to be here today.
Yeah.
But it is my offering that I'm here. And would you guys pray for me? Or can I just pray real quick to like try and get the rest of me here?
Yeah.
Some of me is still yesterday, whatever.
Absolutely.
And that sort of honesty, not like, let's pump it up, guys. Okay. Like, yeah, we're here. Like, let's get amped.
Yes.
It's like, no, I think we lead with our humanness.
Yes.
Our humanity has edges and limits, and we have bad days, and we can still show up and tell the truth about that. And then a lot of times in exposing that weakness, we find our strength.
Yeah.
And we can lead out of that place of humility and honesty. And it makes us then attuned to the room. And we can, to our brothers and sisters, how might somebody else be walking in this morning? Maybe they're stuck in yesterday too. And how can I invite them into the present and to the throne?
So good.
That's a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful description of like how to bring in your artistry.
Well, and there's a ton of grace there too, because I think we learn, and there's space to learn by missing it. So there are times where I've tried to force it and the room didn't go with me or didn't respond. And then I want to, or like, even, I know we've all had this, but like miss the lyric, or like, I went to the chorus and the band didn't. And then you feel like exposed up there.
You feel naked.
You feel naked.
And you're like, shoot, sorry.
And you can get stuck in your head and you can start beating yourself up. And then you're ripped out of any sort of contemplative moment.
Yep.
And people can tell. So I teach voice lessons on the side, and I always try and introduce my kids to, I want you to imagine, you're your friend is up there and she's so nervous and her shoulders are rolled forward and her head is down and her eyes are fluttering and she can't look around the room. And I said, are you relaxed and enjoying it? Or are you like on the edge of your seat going, come on, honey, come on, you can do it. Like rooting her on because you're nervous for her.
Yeah.
And, you put them in like 10-year-old and they're like, oh yeah, totally. I'm like nervous for her. And I'm like, right. So having those feelings is totally normal. But remembering that you are a human that forgets lyrics or, you learn by doing. So there's space for you to work this out. And like a gracious community is going to let it go way quicker than you are. So receive that grace.
Yeah.
And you just go on to the next chorus,
Keep on going.
and you keep going. And what a beautiful example of like, life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Your face is in the mud, and when you're ready, get back up and try again. Wipe it off. Keep going.
Yeah.
But we have these standards for ourselves, and we think, if you are on stage, you should be perfect or have it figured out. And how does anybody ever learn then? So there has to be a space, and I think our community gave me a lot of space to work it out, and then a loving environment afterwards to go, how do you feel? How do you think it went? And then helping me see the areas that I was like, I don't know. Any feedback? And then staying open to feedback, or maybe next time try this. Or, and then also like, we trust you,
Yeah.
It's all right. Didn't land. It's okay.
Yes.
Maybe we'll try something different next time.
Yeah. I think it's a freeing thing when you are an artist. I mean, I think to a degree, any musician up there and our worship teams and any church is going to have a degree of there's an artistry that we want to show up, and we want to bring our craft and bring it well to the table. I think you get the gamut of like, some of you out there might be like, I just like to play and I kind of just know how to play bass enough to get by to serve my church. So, there's a different meaning we assign to like our instrument, that we have. But I think what's really beautiful about a healthy worship team in a healthy church setting is what you're describing of this freedom to like show up as an artist, because it's such a vulnerable thing, but know that like within that setting, your goal is to invite people into a connection with the Lord, to facilitate an open pasture for people to have their own moment of exploration. Yes. So like, so cool to hopefully, as a lot of us are going to be in a worship pastor role at some point, or, we're a part of a worship team, to remember that that's a really key part of helping ourselves stay unlocked and not so locked up is the freedom to mess up, the freedom to like do the dance and figure it out. Because leading a group of people, that group is going to look a little different every week. It's going to be different people. The people themselves are going to be in different headspaces and emotions. And so I just love that you felt the freedom to like, how was that for you you felt rejection in the artist realm? How is that coming in? You're still in this city and you're still around a lot of artists, but now you're in a church setting and you're trying to like do that dance of like, I don't want to shrink. Yeah. Obviously, like you have to use my voice to lead worship. Yeah. How did you wrestle with that?
And in a church of artists.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, there's two things that bubble up for me real quickly. One, I'm going to put a pin in, but I'm going to say it so I come back to it. Comparison and like, going, that's how you should do it, right? And then trying to be that, and then that's not authentic. Right. And so it actually doesn't land with people in a connecting way. But I'll come back to that, because when I was leaving Goatee, it was when the digital boom was happening. So when I first signed, everybody was physical. Product is how the labels made money. The artists made money. Like a CD was $15. Yep. And it was like $3 to press. Well, there's like $12 to go around, and
to everybody.
Yeah, to everybody, and everyone gets a little piece of the pie. But like, there's money to be made there. Then it goes to, we got through like Napster where it was free, but then now it's like it's songs and it's only 99 cents, and so you're splitting $1. And so labels were closing. And when I signed to Goatee, there were 40 employees, and by the time my first record came out, there were 4 employees. Wow. Yeah. So they didn't even know if they were going to keep the doors open. And to their credit, they've adjusted and adapted, and they did. But one of the ways is, you're chasing singles, because it wasn't like make a great album. It was, we need a single. And so they were like, well, we need a pop single. So I wrote with like everybody in the city. I wrote 100 songs. I demoed almost 100 songs. We finally got one and it charted. And then I was like, all right, what's next? And it still wasn't enough. And I was so burned out that I was like, I gotta go, like, for my own dignity. Yeah. And they were like, you're right. Like, they were like, we want to bless you because 1 and 1 didn't equal 2 here. Your 1 was strong. Ours wasn't. And so they gifted me my master's. We left on good terms, except that my heart was broken. Right. Except that I thought like I could will this like fairy tale story to work, and it just didn't work, but good people. And I was just so burned out. I actually wasn't sure I still loved to sing. So I found a reconnection to worship music because 1, I didn't have to write the songs, and it wasn't being critiqued or like radio will play it, radio won't play it. Right. You know, you didn't say Jesus enough. Yeah. You didn't, the gatekeepers at radio. There was no pressure of, are you connecting with this song I wrote? It was like, oh, I'm connecting with this song. I can lead. I either need to believe this or get off the stage. Do I believe it? Is this still true for me? These words, do they resound with me? And how do I bring my whole self to these words? And then 2, it wasn't for the performance thing became really clear, where this was like in a very broken time in my life. I actually led out of my brokenness and I found connection to the room in ways that I hadn't when I thought I was like, listen to me, I have something to say, Yeah. And so I was like, whoa, it's like the backwards way.
Mm-hmm. Right. So surprising.
Yes. Yeah. And so it really helped me to go, I'm going to put the artist thing down for a minute. Like I said, I fell in love with singing and music in my youth group, leading worship. It was always very safe. There's another realm I feel like I can touch. The veil is thin when I'm singing, and God feels close, and space and time feels not so restrictive. And so a sweet moment of connecting through music with Creator is like, okay, I still love this. I just didn't love the machine that I got chewed up and spit out in. But then in that journey comparison, so All Sons and Daughters came out of Journey. And my friend Leslie is the daughter representation of All Sons and Daughters.
She would be known as the daughter of
and if you've heard Leslie sing, I don't need to say anything else. I don't think I've ever heard her hit a bad note. I really don't.
I resonate with that. I don't know.
I don't think shout
out to you, Leslie.
Nails everything. I'm like, is she human? So, and she leads from my, perspective, I was really inspired by the freedom she could lead from. And in my head, it's very easy for me to go, well, you should be more like Leslie then.
Sure.
You should learn to play the guitar.
Felt like,
you should,
the data felt like adding up to be like, this must be the truth.
Right.
Yeah, this is.
And so I think for me, first of all, Leslie was not putting that pressure on me at all. David and Leslie are so wonderful. And I learned so much about like preparing a set and considering transitions and thinking about not ripping people out when that song ends. A hard stop and then a click, 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 count in the new song. But like thinking through like a synth pad that keeps us through and maybe the same keys so that people are in this contemplative space and they're not ripped out of it, but we can stay there and marinate and you can curate all of that. Like David was huge in teaching me so much about that. Yeah. So they were very humble and beautiful leaders, but my little head was like, I should probably do it more like them.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, brokenness has been one of my better teachers. And so when I lead out of kind of a place of desperation, like the other time I was leading more out of a broken place was my marriage was in the crapper. And my church said, is it healing to you right now? Is it life-giving for you to lead together? Because my husband's a musician as well, and we were leading. And or is this taxing and straining? You tell us. So we're not going to rip you off the stage with a shepherd's hook. We just want to know how to love you.
It's amazing.
It was incredible.
What a beautiful example.
Yes. Everything in our life we had lost and had fallen apart, career-wise, and thought we might lose the house and maybe the marriage. We were working on it. They knew we were actively working on it. We were in therapy. And they knew what was going on, and we had come to them, and they saw brokenness and a desire for healing, and they said, what's going to help on that path? Wow. And we prayed about it and said, you know what, this is actually really unifying for us to continue to lead, and we're asking ourselves, are these songs true? And what does it look like to lead them from a place of believing it or needing it to be true? And I really started to realize you sing from a different place then. And the voices, I'm fascinated with it. It's the most vulnerable instrument, if you ask me.
Yeah,
I agree.
Every other instrument is outside of you. Yeah. Like you bring your instrumentation to the piano or to the guitar, but the instrument itself is outside of you.
Yeah.
Whereas your voice is coming from within, you know?
Yes.
Which is why a squabble or a bad note feels so vulnerable, as opposed to like, oh, my pinky slipped. I hit the wrong key on the keyboard, you know? So it's like so vulnerable.
It is. You're like, I messed up. Like,
yes,
actually,
I am wrong.
I am wrong. Not I did something.
Yeah. I played the wrong chord with these extremities.
Right.
But like something from inside of me came out and it was wrong.
Just wrong.
Yes, it's so vulnerable.
It is. Yeah.
But also like, man, if Bob Dylan tried to sing Steve Perry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It would not land,
no.
right?
No.
Like, but yet Bob Dylan had a fantastic career.
Yeah.
Because he knew what he could do and he knew what he couldn't. Like he knew who he was and he knew who he wasn't. And he would be the first one, if you saw that Michael Jackson documentary, like Bob Dylan was so scared at the We Are the World recording. And
oh my gosh, his
like a
face
little boy.
The whole time.
He was just locked up and he was like, you could see imposter syndrome on his face, but he had this beautiful career because he sang from the Bob place. And that's the beauty of the voice being the most vulnerable instrument is if I'm a bearer of the divine, like I have a spark of the divine that nobody else has, and that doesn't make me more or less than it's true for all of us. What does it look like for me to explore that uniqueness as opposed to comparing? So I can be inspired by the David and Leslie's, and that's beautiful. But then that exploration, it should invite I wonder what I can do. Like Steve Perry can sing the alphabet. And we know his voice and we hear it. And like he explored and honed in his craft as well, like good for him. So returning the focus on, I am deeply loved. I've been given something to explore. It's not a surprise to God, but maybe he delights in when I kind of take ownership of what did you give me? Like a kid that opens the present and wants to learn how to use it. Yes. The parent is like, you like the gift I gave you.
Like, what do you think?
What do you think? Try it out. Yeah. And God's like, yeah, I know. I gave you that.
That's so sweet.
So the response is like, I'm learning about this gift and like, this is how I do this. And God, he is deeply pleased by that exploration. And when we're not coveting or jealous of our brothers and sisters because we see their gift and maybe it's like really being received well. Yeah. We need to learn how to be good cheerleaders too.
Yeah.
Like there's not a pie that's being divided, and if their piece is big, mine has to be small. There is space for all of us.
Wow.
Like you cannot divide the infinite. And there is enough space for all of us. Yeah, I stole that from somebody else too.
That's so good though.
But yeah, when my little scarcity brain kicks in and my little girl that didn't feel wanted and doesn't know if she belongs in the world, like that drives my bus quicker than I care to admit.
Yeah.
I just have these mantras and these places I return to where I've tasted some freedom. I have some tools that have worked. And I go, let's pick them back up. I nicely ask my little girl that usually drives us into a ditch to sit in the front seat and not drive.
Right. Yeah. You have a place, you have a voice, but you're not driving this thing where we're not going to go.
Yeah. You don't have a license.
No. Yeah, you don't have a license.
You can come along, but you don't get to drive.
Yeah. That's a very good visual.
So good.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jenna? I was going to share something.
I know. I just feel like this is a podcast I would listen to.
Yeah, I'm like, this is so good.
I'm not crying. I'm fine. It's so good. No, it's so good. Thank you.
I wanted to add because I feel that what I can offer is, so if we can kind of like getting back to it, like, so I I have known Stephanie for 10 years, but before I knew her, I was an eager little 14-year-old who was learning how to lead worship in my youth group. And Stephanie at the time was on tour, and she was passing through a city on a big conference that I looked forward to going every year called Acquire the Fire.
Same.
Yeah, right?
Loved
I mean,
it.
it was so exciting. I felt like I was getting access to like this world of worship music and music that felt so distant and so amazing. And I was just like, what is that world? And Stephanie was on the lineup. She was Stephanie Smith at the time. She was on Go-To Records, and she was touring with this conference. And, you know, she's going through her journey, wrestling with all of these things, doing all of this work, doing all of this disappointment. Meanwhile, and I know I'm not the only one that was feeling this way, I'm this 14-year-old girl who is benefiting from Stephanie showing up in her vulnerable young state, being thrown in, sink or swim.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's sharing, she did a little mini set, and then I think it was like a 30-minute set or something. And then they did an interview, and they were interviewing you about how you got into music and your story. And I think you shared a little about your dad.
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting there like a little sponge, just being like, you know, I think like we have all sorts of roles in the kingdom, like big brother and sisters. And I just was like, she instantly was like, she's a little bit ahead of me down the road. I want to be like that. It was just, even in, you know, like you don't always get to see the fruit of like you showing up, you know, but like, I know I'm not the only one. And here we are now.
No, it's so
both
cool
adults.
to me.
Yeah. And I'm sitting out there just benefiting from your yes, even though it was messy and clunky.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, you know, 8 years later, I moved to Nashville, and Stephanie was on the worship team that I was a part of the worship staff there. And she continued to like show up in my life. And she was someone that was a cheerleader of me showing up as myself because she had to work this all out too. So you just never know. I think what it's saying to me is like, your piece of the pie is going to look different than someone else's. I think that we all have that person in our lives, in our churches, our ministries, our regular jobs, where it's like that person seems like they have a bigger piece of the pie, and or that room is resonating with them more, or their voice is so special, and I feel like mine is like, I'm just trying to like just hit the notes, you know. And yet we just never know if we push through those narratives of like, I'm lesser than, and we can shift the narrative and the story we tell ourselves to like, for some reason I'm here, and it matters that I'm here.
Yeah.
From a place of knowing the Lord's love for us and knowing these tools that you've been talking about. You just never know the yes that your yes impacts somebody else's, to give them courage for their yes.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for Stephanie's yes, because it's invited me. It's been a way that God's invited me into my yes.
Yeah, I know. It's such cool perspective for me, because it's like, sometimes I have to remember that 14-year-old Caitlin met 14-year-old Caitlin met Stephanie. I don't know how old I was, but older.
Yeah.
But 14-year-old Stephanie was dreaming about meeting Toby Mac,
Yeah.
you know? And then I met him.
Yeah.
And I got to go on tour with him, and I got to ride in a tour bus, and I got to play arenas. But in my head, I wanted to be the one people were coming to see at arenas.
Right.
And so it's like the next thing, you want the next thing.
You want the next thing.
And you forget to just be grateful for like, what a freaking cool experience, you know?
Yeah.
So deeply grateful. And I'm so grateful that you came to Journey, Caitlin, because God, in many ways, used you as, I don't want to say.
It won't offend me. It won't offend me.
Like sometimes the thorn in my side that helped me grow, because I wanted your job and it was never offered to me. And I was like, why does she have this? And
we were all wondering that, right? We were all wondering that.
Caitlin and I have had a previous podcast episode where I talk about feeling the exact same way. And I had no idea that you felt. I'm like, why didn't we talk about this? I mean, you have been there longer than I have.
It makes no sense.
But still.
Well,
but it does. It belongs somehow.
It does.
Because here's the thing. I think part of being a good leader is knowing how to be a good cheerleader too.
Yeah.
like when in sports, you get injured, you still show up for the game and you cheer for your team on the side, or, you're not the starter yet, but you show up and you learn from the starter and you still do your work and you practice and you're cheering for the whole. And it was so beautiful for me to go, all right, this is who God has leading here. And to watch you commit to your growth. And then to go, all right, do you want to participate here? And this is the role that I've placed you in. So
hard, man.
It was hard.
So hard.
Because it played into, and then it also deepened the work of, this might not bother somebody else, but it's triggering my little girl.
Yeah.
This feels familiar where I'm overlooked.
Yes.
And, you know, but then the privilege was to watch you grow into the role. And to watch the way that you have handled seasons with grace, your own ups and downs with leading and being in leadership. And you have handled it with so much grace. And I do not doubt that every bit of that journey was ordained. Yeah. And even for me, to have you come in, this young, wide-eyed Liberty grad, green.
Yeah, baby.
And
baby.
And I know you got your tail kicked, and you came in and you kicked some tails, mine. You didn't even know. And I'm going, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm glad she has this role. I bless it. What about me? And then. But
it's so real.
That has to become my prayer then. And I think that there's a God that, already knows that is happening in me.
Sure.
So I come into alignment with it when I tell the truth about it to myself and to God. And God goes, I can work with the truth. There's some things, if you're willing, that I'm going to reveal and heal and work through in you. So just keep showing up. And so
hard.
So hard.
I mean, that must have, truly, that must have just been so hard. It didn't make sense to me either, looking back, except the Lord doing so much work in all of us, you know? So I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's a really real thing in the church. And it's even I've noticed, being now in my 30s, like I've mentored young girls and they are soaring past me as far as like what opportunities they get. I mean, they're doing all these conferences, like everything I've ever asked the Lord for. They just are getting it.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And I'm like, for the first time, since becoming a mom, I'm like sitting on Instagram scrolling. I honestly adore these girls. Like they're like, I know a lot of amazing young women, but they're single, some of them still, and they're cool. And, and it's
oh my gosh, I know.
I feel so irrelevant, and they have no idea.
Right.
They're like, you feel that about me?
I know.
In my head, being younger, I was like, I actually want to be like them. It's like that funny, like I wanted to be like you, or Jenna literally taught me how to write a check. Like she taught me how to pay rent.
I love that memory. It was so fun.
Oh, it's so good.
Not that our age gaps are even that big, but that one at the time, the 20 to 30, that's a big one.
It's a big one.
Now it's not as much anymore. No. But so anyways, I relate now. Yeah. Because I'm like, and that it's hard.
I know. And you're in a season now where life and God is saying either no, not right now, to those things.
Exactly.
But who knows what's marinating for you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where it's like we get so attached to giving God assignments on how he should love us or make things go, and we're so mad when he doesn't listen to us. I'm like, are you kidding me?
It's like, we know this is a good idea. What's your problem, man?
For years. I have gone to Journey for, what do we do? The math, 17 years or so?
Yeah, 17 years.
And I've never been on staff there. Wow, and I just felt like I have so much to offer and I feel overlooked. And you guys put me in, coach, put me in, coach, put me in, coach, put me in, coach. And after a while, I was like, this feels personal. This feels, and then I, it comes and goes in seasons. It's not like I've lived in that for, but yes, seasons, it'll rear its head again. And the most recent one was, 2 years ago. And there's some transition happening. And I was like, now I think I'm more than ever ready. I'm ready. Yeah. And they went a different direction. And I was like, I felt like God said, hey, are you ready to talk about how I would like to use you in the church? And what if it's bigger than Journey? And I was like, oh. And not like, in a flex way, but like it was where the book and the book I didn't write for Journey. Yeah. The Journey is welcome to read the book, my church. And they've obviously loved me into a place where I could write it. And, but the book is my offering to the world. My focus was so on, does this community see me? Pick me. Does this community see me? Pick me. This again? Why this? And it was like, God was like, whenever you're ready, I would love to talk about how I'd like to use you. But I'm asking and inviting you to be open to that, not looking like your expectations.
Wow. What an amazing conversation.
Yes. Spiritual direction helped me so much in my prayer life. But yes, this was like this disruption of, my husband's band has a song called So Far Away, and it said, save our souls from all our dreams come true.
I love that.
That is an amazing line.
I know.
So good.
Golly.
And I think there are times where he wishes he never would have written that.
He's like, dang it.
Yes,
it's out there now.
I'm like, gosh, isn't that the truth though?
Yeah.
And when we
profound.
keep receiving these no's, like even infertility for me, like I went through IVF and IUIs, and I've been poked and prodded like a pincushion. And it's been a continual no or not yet. And after grieving periods and receiving and living in acceptance of the no, then I have to go, okay, well then what is your yes? And the mindset shift and the energy shift of shifting my attention or my focus and saying, okay, I still deeply believe there is a way for me to participate, how to even give life, maybe not through my womb, but like, how can I be a life giver? And staying open to how God would like to do that. Thy will be done, not mine. And it is the hardest place to wrestle your will into submission and say, yeah.
Man, gosh, Steph, you could just like replay that section over and over again. I wonder what it would look like if we got everything we wanted. Because if we didn't learn, like there would be another thing. Yeah. If we kept getting what we wanted, there would still be the other thing, because there's a root thing in there that will not be fixed or solved by getting.
Yes.
Like you could have gotten the number one. You could have gotten, I hope you get a little one day. Obviously, that would be wonderful, but you can get all those things. And yet, can you speak to that for a moment before we wrap up, of like, maybe like, what would you offer to people wrestling with this, like, disappointment of expectations in whatever area of their life? Probably they're tuning in thinking like in a worship context, but honestly, it can be anything.
Yeah.
What would you speak to that? And what would you offer as like, here's what's helped me heal, or what tool can I pick up when that comes up? Because it's going to keep coming up for all of us.
Yeah.
I think it just is, because we're human and we're created to have it filled with himself. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. It's going to sound like a plug, but that's why I wrote thank you for failing me, because it is literally, I'm thinking expectations and people, and like in drought season, the tree their roots has to go deeper, to find water, because it's not on the surface. And so when I feel overlooked, or, I'm disappointed, heartbroken, rejected, all of those things happen. Yeah. We live in a broken world with broken people. Yeah. And we don't get everything we want, and everybody understands that on some level. So I think the church, sometimes we can do a disservice when we look at Scripture and we claim a promise that God gave to, like for me with the infertility stuff, I want to look at God's promise to Sarah, and I want to claim it for mine, for me. But God said that to Sarah. God's revealing who he is and what he can do. And it's a beautiful story, but that's between God and Sarah. Wow. I know. And that could be controversial for some people, but it's actually really beautiful for me. Like, I think God is always telling us about himself and his relationship to his creation. And so when I was really, because all of these, like, I'm feeling overlooked by my church, my label, my husband, my dad, but God had always been close. And infertility has been the one thing where I was like, you're not participating. You feel far. Yeah. Are you actually a jerk? Like, I've had to ask those questions. Yeah. And so like, I was like, I want a promise. I want a promise. I'll wait. I'll be patient for it. Even if you just tell me it's coming. And I felt like God just cupped my chin in his hands. And he said, sweet Steffi, do you want a promise? And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Like, duh.
I felt like God said, I will never leave you or forsake you. And I was like,
wow.
Dang it.
I know.
Not the promise I wanted.
Not the solution that I was hoping for.
I know. But I tell you what,
Yeah.
when I hold God up to that, that was his promise to me. And he has been so freaking faithful. And so I can sing from that place. I do not have everything I want. And my heart has been broken more times than I can count. But I have known a God that has not left me alone, has not forgotten me, has not forsaken me, has provided what I need. I was even coming home from Trader Joe's one day, and while I was at Trader Joe's, a friend texted me a picture of the baby gender reveal cake, and it was a particularly just fragile day for me. We had gone through infertility together, and her IVF worked, and mine didn't.
Oh, man.
Yep. Ooh. And I was at Trader Joe's, and I got the picture, and I just put my basket down, and I left. And I was like, the goal is to get out without melting down. Yeah. And so I got in my car, and I was driving home, and I was at a red light, and it was like church bells were playing, and I was just sort of numb. And then I was like, I know that song. It's a hymn. What is it? And I was just trying to distract myself, and it was Great is Thy Faithfulness. And it said, all I have needed, Thy hand hath provided. And I was like, oh, that's true. I wish I could. I want to rage. I want to shake my fist at you. I have what I need. I don't have everything I want. And I felt like there's a prayer in there. And I was like, God, I was reminded of that. I'll never leave you or forsake you. I was like, would you do something that just reminds me that you see me? That's what I need today. You know, that's one way I need you to love me. And I got home, another 10 minutes home. And there was a bag wedged in between my door, and it was a card and flowers from a friend that was like, I actually had this a few days ago, but I forgot to give it to you.
Oh my gosh.
And just in the time that I'd gone to Trader Joe's, put my basket down and drove home with no groceries, she had this. It was actually a Trader Joe's bag.
No way.
Yes. And it just was like this love bomb of I forgot to give it to you the other day. I knew today was the day. And it was like her words were so life-giving to me. And I felt like God was like, I have not forgotten you. And again, I can sing from a place where that's true. And I invite others to, your desire is your prayer. And then that you release it and you surrender it. And you look to a God who surprises us in the ways that he loves. But there is a promise for you, and it might just be that he will never leave you or forsake you. He may save you from all your dreams come true, and it might hurt like hell while it's happening. But you have not been forgotten. You are not alone. There is space for you, even if it feels like you're surrounded by no's. May we give thanks for help unknown already in motion to us. And when it arrives, may God find us faithful in praising him, even when we didn't know what it was and it wasn't here yet.
Wow. Goodness. I was sitting basking in it.
I know. Oh,
so good. Do you have anything to add to that, Jen?
That's about it. It's like I want to end there because that's just so beautiful.
So beautiful. We are so grateful that you keep saying yes.
Glad.
Yeah.
You keep saying
thank you.
Because you're someone that I know you've had so many temptations to run and hide, and it's okay that you've taken your grieving moments in your space, but you are someone that leans in and you keep showing up, and that is such a beautiful gift to not only your community, but like your yes in your book. And there's not many people that are willing to give away their story and like that, because it's a gift, and you don't owe it to anybody.
Nobody was begging for it either.
Well, I honestly don't think people do beg for people's story unless you're like MJ or something.
Right.
But like, I think that like I think that it's gonna keep. I hope and pray at least that you get to see the full circle moments, and you get even little glimpses of the fruit, because I think that's God being faithful
Yes.
is showing you how he loves how you've been faithful. And, you know, there have been like other people that haven't stayed in our communities, and like God has moved people and shifted people. And I think you have this beautiful way of being like, hey, this is painful, or this transition is hard, or whatever the thing that I've seen you walk through in your life, but you are very faithful to show up. And it's a real gift. It really is. And we're lucky and blessed to get to be in your wake of that.
Well, and part of it, like, because iron sharpens iron. There are times where I'm like, oh my gosh, Caitlin is like putting the work in. So I gotta keep doing my work.
Through the spit up. That's so sweet. That's so sweet.
It's inspiring to see people living in their lane.
Yeah. And in their process. Yeah. I would just encourage you all listening. I'm sure you guys are seeing situations in your own story, in your own life, flashing through your head as you're listening to Stephanie's story and listening to our conversation here. And I would just encourage, being a part of a church is messy. We've established that probably every episode. We've talked about that, because it's a bunch of humans together. Being a part of a team, leading a team is messy. But keep, with the exception of like a toxic situation, keep showing up, keep leaning in. Don't be afraid to have the hard conversation with yourself, with your leaders. It's better to lean in, and I feel like it dismantles the power that fear and isolation and being offended can brew when we choose to lean into connection with each other. And I think that's what makes the three of us, even our relationship, so cool and beautiful, is because I think that there's a thread of each of us, like in our own ways. We kept leaning into our communities, to each other. And that's why, you know, we've all led worship together through a lot of transition and hard and messy. And I am really proud of us that, like, it's not always been easy, and yet we're here and we're all better for it. So, like, that's the gift of being human together. And I would love if more teams got that gift with each other. Like, so cool to make that history. So true. Yeah. Jenna, would you wrap us up?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Steph, for being here. It's been so sweet. And I will put a link to buy your book on the description. So check that out. That's going to be there for you. And tune in next week. We're going to talk about some interesting things. It's going to be fun. Yeah. Tune in next week. We'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.